And moderating today's panel is Miss Gloria Seay. She is a licensed master social worker with a Case Act T. She's had an extensive career in child welfare within the private and nonprofit organizations, including roles as a case planner, a sociotherapist for preventive and foster care programs. In her 14 years of child welfare experience, she started off working at ACS as a CPS worker for the Protective Diagnostic Unit, and then she moved on to the ACS Child Advocacy Center. She's also been worked as a psychotherapist for New York City's seasoned citizens. And she is also an active member of the ACS Professional Development Program Scholarship Selection Committee. And in all of these roles, she continues to maintain a commitment to the values and ethics of the social work profession. And in her current role, she is the clinical manager of social work at the Nicholas Scopetta Children's Center. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Gloria Seay.
Okay. Well, good afternoon again, everyone. I'd like to thank you all once again for joining us, whether you are virtual, on Zoom, or present in person. Thank you for dedicating your time and attention to this afternoon's discussion. As helping professionals, we understand that it is not only crucial to seek out information, but also to absorb it. But we also must foster meaningful discourse about subject areas that are often neglected but undeniably important. By curating these types of conversations, we empower marginalized voices and perspectives. We also cultivate a deeper understanding and deep empathy. And with today's socio-political climate, both locally and globally, that's something we all need, a little bit more empathy and a little bit more understanding. And essentially, we need that to readjust the lens, which is one of the themes for today. So during this panel discussion, we will lend our focus to unaddressed trauma, understanding the signs, symptoms, and the impact of trauma among re-entering individuals or formerly incarcerated individuals. It is a worthy, line of inquiry. So, trauma is almost universal for those who have incarceration history. And according to a report done by the Bureau of Justice Statistics, 85% of individuals in the U.S. criminal justice system have experienced some trauma at some point in their life. So incarceration itself is a traumatic experience. Before that, I do want to invite our panelists up so that they can come up and sit down and get ready to speak. And to start, we have Dr. Shari Richardson, who we can identify as a mental health normalizer. She is a licensed clinical social worker with 20 years of experience working with individuals, families, in child welfare, juvenile justice, and she has a multitude of administrative experience. And she's currently an assistant professor here at Medgar Evers. She also has a private practice, and does some consultation for formerly incarcerated and those who are facing incarceration. We also have Mr. Haynes, who is a paralegal and a staunch advocate for prison and sentence reform. He collaborates with a multitude of organizations and projects. He educates as a speaker and empowers and encourages others for advocacy for social change. He does volunteer at the Wesley Methodist Church, or Wesley Methodist Church Food Pantry. And we also have Dr. Divine Pryor, who is a social scientist with a vast experience in criminal justice, public health, and social services. He is the co-founder, CEO, and president of People's Police Academy, which is dedicated to educating and training the community. His organization believes in community collaboration. Public health and safety is a shared responsibility. And he also has served in a multitude of administrative roles. So I'd like for you guys to give them a round of applause. So, there's vast research on the impact of trauma, and this research usually falls into two categories. One which we discussed, but first we'll start with lifetime traumatic experiences, which can include current experience, as well as what Ms. Latoya has already expressed and shared earlier, the adverse childhood experiences, which is the ACEs project conducted in the 1990s. And the project, basically, just to reiterate what she was saying, was to explore the impact of childhood challenges and how it's linked to later life health and well-being. According to a publication on the lifetime of vulnerability, incarcerated people have higher rates of poor health, mental health illness, and histories of adverse childhood experiences compared to the general population. I'm going to turn this question to all of our panelists to share their insight and thoughts on, but I'm going to start with Dr. Richardson. She does have vast experience in child welfare, working with children and families. So, what would you say is a connection or correlation between ACEs and trauma for those with incarceration histories?
So as you noted, the rates of adverse childhood experiences among folks who are incarcerated versus the general population is much higher. The more adverse childhood experiences an individual has, usually increases the likelihood that they're going to be involved in some level of criminality, okay? And so in terms of the trauma, again, we've all experienced some level of trauma, but when you look at communities of color in particular, tend to suffer more in the way of trauma. And usually it's unaddressed and unresolved, which also then tends to lead to criminal behavior. Going back to something that soon-to-be Dr. Dalmage said in her presentation as it related to the neurological effects of trauma, you know, as far as like how it affects the development of the prefrontal cortex, the prefrontal cortex is that part of the brain that's responsible for decision-making and emotion regulation. Exposure to prolonged trauma, exposure to, you know, stress, complex trauma, and all of these things serves as a cause for poor emotion regulation and also poor decision-making, which also then leads to criminality. Okay, so the connection there between trauma, adverse childhood experiences, and then how it manifests in criminal behavior is like, it's clear in terms of if you're looking at the data and you're looking at available information.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to share their thoughts?
So first of all, good afternoon. Let me acknowledge the president of the college, the provost, and everyone in the executive team, all the folks who put this together, everybody who prepared the food. I certainly want to acknowledge you and thank you. And this is a wonderful turnout. This is really exceptional. So I'm honored to be here today. My name is Dr. Divine Pryor, and as stated, I am the Chief Executive Officer of the People's Police Academy, which is located right here at Medgar Evers College. And the People's Police Academy is a very unique institution in that we create platforms to allow people who otherwise would never be in the same room to come together and engage in dialogue. They discuss very, very serious issues and they problem solve together. And we do that throughout the city of New York and beyond. And so we're happy to be here. There's not a better place that I'd rather be than Medgar Evers College. This is my third time being here, first time in the 90s, then in the early 2000s, and now I'm back. So I can't seem to stay away from Medgar. So I'm gonna deal with this a little differently because I want to push it back a little. I think that if you look at the history of Black people in America, and I'm sure you heard this earlier today because I saw that there was a discussion about post-traumatic slave syndrome. But if you look at 320 years of enslavement and the type of dehumanization that took place during that period, the fact that families were separated systematically and automatically, people were hung, people were maimed, the type of dehumanization that was a part of everyday life was trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma. So then we go into post-slavery. We go into a period, the antebellum South, where they began to continue slavery by taking the slave codes and translating them to the black codes, and so that the trauma could be continued, but they could do it under a different guise. And the 13th Amendment, which supposedly released us from slavery, really was just an instrument to re-enslave us. Why is that? Because a part of the black codes that were developed after slavery were things like literacy. If a person wanted to vote, for instance, and they were a former slave, they had to fill out a form. But if they filled out the form, they were arrested because, see, the only way they could fill out the form, they would have to know how to read, and reading was illegal. And so therefore, you were post ex facto, breaking a law that didn't exist at the time, but they're applying it anyway. Vagrancy laws. The vagrancy law was a very interesting law that an individual got the word that they were free. And so they would get their baggage and they would leave the plantation to look for their loved ones, their siblings, and so forth. The moment they stepped off the plantation, they were arrested. Why? Because you're a vagrant. A vagrant was anybody who didn't have a place of residence or was unemployed. And so here we have a system that has traumatized a people over centuries, continue to traumatize them, and then today, many will say that the prison industrial complex is nothing more than yesterday's plantation. They just cloaked it under a different disguise. So I want to start with that. I want to finish with this. It's no secret that the great-great-great-great-grandsons and great-great-granddaughters are former slaves of those who occupy today's prisons. It should be no surprise that the trauma that yet was unaddressed, because remember, after slavery, the therapists still have not come. How could you go through centuries of trauma and yet never receive one clinical intervention, one form of therapy, one psychosocial session, but yet you're supposed to just go on with your life as if nothing happened? So we're talking trauma on top of trauma. So if in fact our behavior is somewhat peculiar, excuse me, we might be a wee bit off, considering the trauma that's yet still unaddressed. I'll leave it there, but I'll continue when I return.
Hello, how y'all doing? My name is Kevin Haynes. I'd like to thank the staff and all you all for being here and allowing me to be here. Getting to what the doctor both of them just spoke about regarding the trauma. I know about that trauma firsthand. One thing that plagues our community, in particular, community of color, is the stigma of seeking mental health. We've been told you're weak, you don't need it. It's a strength. And this continues to perpetuate from generation after generation after generation. So therefore, you can't help nobody who think that's sick, that don't know that that don't want the help. This is one of the first hurdles that we must overcome. We must tell our children and our family members and friends that it's okay not to be okay and to seek the mental health that you would need to address these type of traumas. I myself, I received 558 months in 1994 of a federal system under the mandatory minimums. Of that, I did 27 years. All right. I have seen everything you all are now talking about in that system. I have heard some of the horrific stories. Maybe I will go into it as we go around with these questions, and I will address that. But as the doctor said about the slave code, the vagrancy laws, spitting on the ground, looking at a white woman, whistling at a white woman. I mean, if they don't cost you your life, you can spend the rest of your life in prison. This is something that I have done with James Jones Reinvention Center. We have something called the Day of Truth Tour with the Honorable Van Jones. And what we've been doing was, Shari was present. What we've been doing was nationwide, we've been going around addressing the 13th Amendment and why the 13th Amendment needs to be abolished.
There you go.
But getting back to the topic at hand, yes, it's years and years and years of trauma being perpetuated, that has been perpetuated. But it has to start with us. We have to tell our kids, we have to tell our family members and loved ones, you are not weak. You are not weak to seek that mental health.
All right, thank you. So definitely sticking on the topic of just childhood experiences and that compound trauma, it's estimated that over 105,000 children have a parent serving time in either prison or in jail, and that is in New York State alone. And this is according to the Office of Children and Family Services. With that being said, I want to turn this first question to Dr. Pryor first, and then we invite all of the panelists to answer these questions. The incarceration of a parent is significant and it's often an overlooked issue, and it does have those profound implications on children. So in understanding these impacts is crucial for devising effective intervention and support systems to mitigate these adverse consequences. What is the specific impact that incarceration of a parent has on a child?
Ooh, how much time do we have?
She's gonna let us know.
So what the research informs us is that children of incarcerated parents are 9 times more likely to be incarcerated themselves. And the reason that is the case because the separation of a mother or father from their child under some serious circumstances, which I'll describe momentarily, is traumatic in a way that is hard to even describe. Imagine you're a 5-year-old child and your door gets kicked in and 5 or 6 officers come in to arrest one of your parents. And right in front of your eyes, body slam them to the ground, possibly, hit them, kick them, handcuff them, and then drag them out where you're screaming, "Mommy, Daddy," in front of them, without anyone even acknowledging that you're there and you're. Imagine the terror of seeing your parents dragged away. Imagine you in a place of uncertainty. You're bewildered, you're confused, you don't know what's going on, but your parent is gone. Now you're left to go with possibly a sibling, possibly a grandparent, or if not, to the foster care system. We don't have time to get into that, right? But the child now is facing a seriously emotional situation that has placed their body in a state of shock. They are absolutely frozen. Yet the next day, they're expected to get dressed, get up, and go to school. But that's not even where it is, because let's assume they make it to school. Assume they had a nutritious meal, which a lot of children don't. And so if you don't have a nutritious meal, then that means that your stomach is fighting your brain. Therefore, you're not attentive. You can't focus in the classroom. Separate subject. But you come into school after last night's trauma. And I'm in school today, and God forbid if word gets out that your parent was incarcerated. Kids can be very mean in school. And so they're calling you names, and now you deal with that, and you end up getting into a fight. So now you're placed in detention. What? The same circumstance that your mom or dad was just placed in the night before? So now you too are detained? So now we have more trauma. Mm-hmm. And needless to say that since there's a certain view in mind that, black children, because those are the only children that I know. I've never been a white child. Black children have been ill-defined. If you look at the work of some of my colleagues, Jawanja Kunjufu in particular, countering the conspiracy to destroy black boys, he speaks about the fact that they look at black boys as if we are inherently violent, that we're incorrigible, that we're not teachable. So when they see that behavior, they ignore it because they figure this is characteristics of young black boys. So therefore, there is no intervention, there is no testing, there is no help, there's no need, because as far as they're concerned, you're acting naturally. So that further traumatizes you. I would love to go on, but I have 2 other colleagues, so I'm just going to pass it along.
So I'm actually going to piggyback a little bit off of that. So in my experience in child welfare, children who have parents that are incarcerated, they, like Dr. Pryor said, they go through a lot. So now you're in foster care. Your parent is incarcerated. You don't know if your parent is going to be released. And if they are released, you don't know if you're going to be returned to them. And if you are returned to them, under what circumstances. You're in a stranger's home, because even sometimes when you're placed with family, that's still strange. Okay? So you're dealing with all of this, and like Dr. Pryor said, you're expected to go to school, and you're expected to behave, and you're expected to do your schoolwork, and nobody talks about the trauma. Nobody says, hey, you know what? How about you have a meeting or sit down with a school counselor, and let's talk about how we can best support you as you go through this, okay? It's not until they end up in some type of criminal justice-involved system that then maybe somebody says, oh, well, you know what? Let's do an assessment of trauma, okay? But let's take a look at what that system entails, because that system was not designed for people of color, okay? The assessment tools that are being used to assess, these experiences were not designed for people of color. So then if you're looking at it from not only a systemic sort of, lens, but then you're also looking at it through a cultural lens. You're looking at cultural disparities in the education system. You're looking at disparities in the criminal justice system. You're looking at disparities in the juvenile justice system. And you are also looking at disparities in the child welfare system. So every single system that child is going to encounter, there is some disparity there that already sets them up to fail before they ever get out the door. Okay? So as a social worker, for me, being a Black person and also being a person who actually had that experience of watching a parent, get arrested, it's a thing of, you have to deal with all of that. You have to remember these things when you are interacting with your clients. Okay, you have to kind of be able to put yourself in their shoes and think the way that they're thinking about it, whether you've been through that experience or not. So when you're asking questions, when you're exploring, when you're thinking about what types of interventions that you might want to, put in place, you have to take all of these things into consideration, because if you're not, then you're part of the problem too. You're not taking that holistic and sort of wide, broad view of that person's situation, not just from what happened to them in that moment, but what's been happening to them all throughout the course of their life, and even before in some instances. So.
You heating it up in here, sister.
What the two of them said is true and exact and right on point. And I'm gonna like to follow up on that from personal experience and life's experience. Listen, in the 1980s and the early 90s, we had the crack era. This is what we seeing now. The early 90s, mid 90s, and the 1980s, you had the crack era. From that era, you had mothers and fathers who were strung out on that crack. And what they made was residue, these crack babies. These crack babies is now adults.
Okay.
And them same babies are having babies. These are the same babies that was crying through withdrawal. This is the reason why the drugs is the way they are now. This is the reason why they can't think the way they do. This is why they think the way they think. I watched this in the system. I wasn't locked up for selling drugs. I was locked up for something else. But however, I despise these guys because I stayed in that system so long to bypass a generation to watch that generation come in. They got high tolerance for drugs, high tolerance for pain, and very little understanding between right and wrong. So to all y'all psychiatrists and therapists that's here, take that into account. I had a guy named Mike I used to talk to, and he stayed in trouble. He had a record long as his own. And he's a youngster. Young enough to be my son. Because I'm 55. I'll be 56 in May. And we talking. One day he broke down to me and told me how his mother was on crack. He grew up crack baby. He had no food in the house. He went out to sell drugs and do different things. He said, but before that, they put him in foster care. Foster care put him in a foster parent house. While he's in the foster parent house, the brother is raping him, making him give him all types of oral sex and stuff. And this had a devastating effect on him. And my heart bled when I heard them horrific stories. And heaven knows what has happened to the girls. And this is stuff that's not really being taken into account when they're locking them up and throwing away the key. Or when someone is giving them a psychiatric diagnosis. So just be mindful of that error in some of these kids and stuff you're talking to. You see, I missed that generation. I had a real man in my house. And a couple of men. I had my dad and I had my stepdad. And the mistakes I made was at that time in the 90s, they had something called mandatory minimums, which is also I'm speaking about, and I've been in talks with Representative in Virginia, Tim Scott, regarding the mandatory minimums, because what they do is over incarceration. So now you take the man out the house, away from his family forever, literally forever. And when you come home, what you come home to is grown children. What you gonna tell them? The streets raised them. And then contingent on who your partner was, you women, you men, some older, some younger, pick your partners on who you're gonna have these babies by wisely. Because that's gonna be the reflection of your seed should anything happen to you or her. So just take that into account, of that era, these kids, and the trauma that they have been through on coming up.
Let me just add two more things to that. The first thing is that medication is not the cure-all for everything.
Put that
Okay.
mic in front of you so they can hear. I don't want them to listen.
Medication is not the cure-all for everything. Okay? We have
there you
now gotten into this culture of, oh, let's medicate. Medication is not the cure-all for trauma. Okay? You're not going to take a pill and all the trauma that you suffered over a lifetime is miraculously just going to poof, be gone. Okay? And so that's something that I want people to take into consideration as well, because as soon as, a child acts out, or as soon as an adult acts out, I hear, oh, well, you know what, that person should be on medication. No, maybe they shouldn't be on medication. Maybe you need to, as someone said earlier, try a different approach. If the approach that you are, utilizing is not the approach that's working for that person, then you have to be able to try something else that is going to connect with that person without wanting to medicate them. Okay? So that's the first point that I wanted to make. The second point that I wanted to make was in relation to, something that, Mr. Haynes said in regards to, the system. Look, at the end of the day, we all, like I said, we've all experienced some level of trauma, okay? How that manifests as you get older is different in each one of us, okay? Some of us take that trauma and we become overachievers, okay? Some of us take that trauma and we become underachievers, okay? Some of us take that trauma and we just internalize it and we turn it against ourselves. But you have to be cognizant of which one are you doing, okay? And what impact is it really having on your decision making? So going back to the point about picking your partners wisely, if you're in these relationships where, you're constantly under some level of emotional or physical abuse, where's the connection to the trauma? Okay, like what Well, why are you finding yourself in these types of relationships? Okay, like why don't you value yourself and love yourself enough to maybe make better decisions? Maybe it's not a situation where you don't want to, but maybe you legitimately just don't know how to. You can't, because your brain has been in some way rewired or reprogrammed to now think that maybe you're not. And that's really all the more reason. The last point I want to make though too is that for those of you in the room that are social workers and that are going to be working with, all types of populations, one of the most important things that you can do for yourself is have your own therapist. Okay? You cannot do this work and not have your own therapist. You just can't. So if there's nothing else you take from today, go find a therapist.
Hold on.
You talking right?
Hold on. I would like to address that. That's why she talked to me for 10 hours. Hey, listen. Woo-wee. Listen. But for real, about the social workers, psychiatry, therapists, the medication. In the state and in the federal system, you're not going to get a psychiatrist, a therapist, they don't care. Thorazine is the way out. So what they do is they dope you up. And it's sad how it's just everybody's walking around like zombies. They dope you up. And what happens there, if you don't have a group of guys that will stand up for this guy, he'll be molested. Because a few times we got together enough of this to go in there for a cigarette. It's crazy. So, but now what happens when this guy's released back on the street? This is what society is dealing with. See, I'm just giving you all the inside from the inside out, not from the outside in.
We want the inside.
So this is what y'all gonna be dealing with. So take what I'm saying, don't take what I'm saying for grain of salt. Take what I'm saying like, look, this is when you see this person, just assume he's been through everything until y'all start talking to him and you begin to open up, and then you'll know where to go from there. But take that into consideration. But like you said, because this is what they do. They just medicate everything. So what happens? This guy comes to society. He's not medicated no more every day.
All right. Thank you. All right. So,
I'm liking it.
as everyone has shared, thank you all for your lived experience and just sharing that understanding and giving us more of a perspective on what this entails, what trauma looks like, and what's happening out here. To reflect back a little bit on children who have parents who are incarcerated and the things that they experience and the impact that it has. Working in child welfare, they do have programs. We do want to make sure that we lend some understanding that incarcerated parents still are parents, and they still deserve respect, and they still have their rights, and they should be treated as such. ACS has a program through the Family Permanency Services, and it's called Children of Incarcerated Parents and Parent Program. Of Incarcerated Parent Program. And one of their models is out of sight but not out of mind. And we should keep that in mind. That these parents, although they're gone, and depending on what happens or what they did, it doesn't matter to a degree. But they're still parents, and we need to just understand that. So moving along, and as we've discussed, these lifetime traumatic experiences are just ACEs we went through, but lending perspective to lifetime traumatic experiences. They explore trauma that has occurred across the lifetime or the life course. And we need to have an understanding of that to get a full constellation of the adversity that the majority of justice system individuals experience. So I do want to turn this question to Mr. Hayes. And I invite the panelists to answer as well. And I also want everyone in the audience you have your cards there. Critically think, start coming up with your own questions, and think, about what you would like to know in regards to unaddressed trauma, understanding the signs, symptoms, and impact of trauma amongst formerly incarcerated individuals. So as I was saying, what are some of the observable signs, or how does unaddressed trauma manifest among incarcerated individuals? And how can social workers or any workers identify, assess, and even implement change for this population?
Well, first, it starts with communication. With communication, it'll be trust. You have to establish some sort of trust to get anyone to open up. All right? Regarding traumas, different traumas, I would tell anyone, loved one or family or friends, that if a person told you that an alien came down in a spaceship and jumped on them in their cell, to believe them. Because we are in the greatest country in the world. And this country goes around and tell other countries how to dictate, they try to tell them how to dictate their prisons, when in fact, they are the worst hypocrites. I'll give you your own personal experience. 1995, there was a nationwide lockdown in the Federal Bureau of Prison. This was after the Million Man March and when Congress had failed to change the crack laws. For those who don't know what that was, the crack laws is regarding powder versus the hard cocaine, where they was giving them 101 for the crack and the white boys 1-1 for the powder. So Congress failed to do that. What ended up happening, it was a nationwide explosion. They shut the whole Bureau of Prisons down, right? With that, I was in USP Lewisburg. We pretty much kept it peaceful. However, after that, due to the economy, because y'all got to realize the unicorn in these prisons, the unicorn, which is a prison business, is on the stock market. This is like slave labor. They might give you 3 cents or 20 cents an hour, and they got this on the stock market. So who gets this is some judges, prosecutors, lawyers. This is who is eligible for this, right? All right. So we want to get a change. However, because we mess with their economy, they started something that, if y'all watch prison movies, y'all heard of the SMOOTH program. It's an 18 months program that they put you in. We was the first ones. We was like their experiment, all right? Now, when you get there, they put a hood over your head, they beat you up, right? For the ones who try to fight and buck, such as myself, they strip you down naked and they chain you up to a brick thing, to your ankles and in your hands. And they leave you there for hours on hours. They might feed you or put water in your mouth every so many hours, but they leave you there. All this is illegal. They mark you, and then they have like these, what they call security lights. And each light got like maybe 3,000 watts, and it shines down on you. So you try to close your eyes, but it looks like it's coming through there. So much so it begins to mess with your sensory, and the light have sound, like a buzzing sound, right? But you're tired and you're worn out. Eventually your body will shut down. So after so many days of this, you go through this. So now you have to play a mind game with yourself. And it's one of 3 things. Either you're gonna kill yourself, let it drive you insane, or love yourself. And me, I chose to love myself. So what happened? So what happened with that is you go through this, and this is a form of torture because that's sleep deprivation. The whipping is physical torture, and you got to go through this for the next 18 months to 2 years. So I took the high road. I understood that a dead slave is a bad slave. So I started showing out. Y'all ain't doing this to me. And as soon as I did that, for a few months straight, it stopped. And they just went on to somebody else. And then in 2007, the same stuff they did to the people in Abu Ghraib in Iraq. It's the same stuff they did here. So much so, Donald Rumsfeld, who was the Secretary of Defense, got right on TV and says, oh, what's the big deal what we did to them? This is nothing more than what we do to our prisoners when they have a prison riot. But now, for those who don't overcome that, they come out to the streets to y'all. So to the social workers, take that into account. Open up to them. Talk to them. Gain their trust. And let them know, first and foremost, let them know it's no shame in it. To tell your story, there's no shame in it. And that's the start. That's the start.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So,
I was so focused, he had me so mesmerized about his story that I forgot the question. What was the question? Thank you.
the question is, just the FYI, we have about 5 more minutes. But the question was pretty much, what are some of the observable signs
Okay, I got it. Okay, I'm back.
Okay, all right.
Okay, I'm back, yo.
All right.
So, in the interest of time, there's something that I want to say to everyone and anyone here who has a loved one who may be incarcerated. And this is not coming from my research and analysis and my epidemiological profiles, none of that. This is coming from the fact that as a former consumer of correctional services, I'm going to share something with you very, very personal. Yeah, I'm gonna let it soak in a little. Yeah, consumer of correctional services. Yeah. If you have a loved one in prison, you got to understand that prison is a total state of isolation. They refer to them as total institutions. And in order for them to control the population there, they have to strip you of your independence and make you dependent on the system. That means they have to control you emotionally. They have to control you psychologically. They have to control you physically and every other way you can think of. The economy that there are no dollar exchanges, so whatever little item you can get on is extremely valuable. It could be a cup, it could be a pencil, a cigarette. Everything is valuable now. So they have total control of your reality, and you are forced by matter of survival to adjust to these abnormal situations. We're not even going to talk about the potential danger. We're not going to talk about the risks. We're not going to talk about the psychological manipulation. We're not going to talk about the violence. So all of that, that's another category of the trauma. But the fact that you've been separated from your loved ones and there's no connection, I'm asking you, I'm pleading with you, if you have someone in prison, do you know how important a letter is? Just a letter. It could be 1-2 paragraphs just saying, I love you, I miss you, and we want you to come home. That person's going to read, the first night they get the letter, they're going to read it 20 times, that first night. Then the next day they're going to read it some more. That's just how valuable and how powerful it is to have a person separated from their loved one for years with no connection, no letters, no packages, no visits, is contributing to their trauma. This is what I'm saying to you. So if in fact you have a loved one, I am begging you to take a few moments and write them a letter. And better if you can go see them on a visit. And better if every now and then you can put together a little package of some canned goods, some Jack Mac and some tuna and some other things, and the prison will tell you what's acceptable and send them that package. It means the world. That's how you minimize the trauma.
Right.
That's how you, because we don't want to, we want to deal with trauma recovery, right? And we don't want to re-traumatize someone. And if someone's in a traumatic situation, we want to do all we can to minimize the impact. That's not what I was going to say, but I was forced to say that by virtue of time. But thank you for listening.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
So, to just, I guess, put more of a clinical or social worker lens on it, you know, the correctional system was marketed under the guise of rehabilitation, but the last thing that it does is rehabilitate anyone. It really does more to cause symptoms of PTSD or exacerbate symptoms of PTSD that they already come in with, like, you know, hypervigilance, anger, distress. All of these things are just, signs of like PTSD. But the system isn't designed to actually address any of that. If anything, it's designed to further just exacerbate what's already present, or if it wasn't present, it creates it. Okay, and so this is why so many people, once they're released from the prison system, it's, yes, not only do you have to become reacclimated to what's out here in society, especially if you've done a significant amount of time, but then you also now have to kind of like, sort of in some ways, sort of retrain your brain to adjust to what life looks like on the outside, because you've been in that environment for so long that now it's in you. And that's one of the reasons why the recidivism rate is high, because if you don't have that support, if you don't have people around you that are really like, pulling you out, pulling you to the carpet and holding you accountable for things and connecting you with resources and services that you need, it's difficult to adjust. It's difficult to come back and just forget what's happened for the last 27 years, or however long you've been incarcerated. And so if we want to talk about what we can do, I'm not going to talk about this just simply from the lens of a social worker. This has to be a community effort. Okay, so social worker is only one aspect of someone that's re-entering into society after being incarcerated. It's up to us as a community to embrace that person and to provide them and help them with any level of resources that you think they might need or that they're even asking for. If they don't know what to ask for, suggest. Right. Don't force, but suggest. So this isn't something that is just isolated to what a social worker can do. This is, we have to all put our hands in. We all have to offer some level of support. If this person is looking for a job and you have a capacity to help them with some level of employment, help them. One of the things that I've learned is that for people who have been incarcerated, most of them, when they get out, they want to work. They have something to prove. To themselves, to their families, to the people that love them. So it's, why not give them a shot? If you have the power to do that, do it. Because that's one thing that could possibly help with reducing recidivism.
That's right.
So kind of piggybacking a little bit off of what Dr. Pryor said as well, sometimes it's the small things that you can do that make all of the difference in the world to a person who has been incarcerated. And that's not something that any of us in this room or even on the Zoom can take for granted, because that small thing can make the difference between that person going out and robbing a bodega and killing somebody versus them finding a different way.
Thank you.
And so that's something, again, that not just as social workers, but as humans, we have to put the humanity back into how we treat people who were formerly incarcerated.
I love it.
Thank you. So at this time, we do not have time to take questions from, We do not have time to take questions for those participating outside of the panel, but hold on to them, utilize them, let them be your empowerment to be an agent of change, as many of us are or are aspiring to be. I thank you for these panelists sharing your insight and lending your perspective.
Thank you, and I have plenty of cards.
All right, y'all, how y'all doing? Dr. Snowden, Social Work Department. Dr. Hernandez, Chair of the Social Work Department. We so happy to be here. We're going to present some awards. Y'all ready for this? Yes. Y'all ready for this? Yes. All right, the very first one, Dr. Hernandez, is for you. This is the Professor Elaine Reed Award. Yes. The Professor Elaine Reed Award that we are presenting
and
to a
Professor
student.
Elaine Reed is joining us.
Woo, woo!
It's nice to be here and hear awards presented on your behalf instead of you know what, and then getting awards named after you. So this award goes to Casey Ortiz. You all know Casey. She volunteers for about everything. Seen everywhere, and is certainly deserving of the award. Unfortunately for her, well, maybe fortunately for her, she's in New Orleans at the ABSW conference. Ordinarily, I'd be jealous, but I was at another social work conference in New Orleans earlier in the month, so I expect pictures of them Friday and Saturday night on Bourbon Street. But but that's a well-deserved reprieve. So I thought somebody was coming to accept the award on her behalf, but.
So Professor Reed will accept the award for Ms. Casey Ortiz on her behalf.
And a well-deserving award, let me say that.
Absolutely.
Thought I would meet her.
Before Professor Reed sits down, y'all know we wouldn't have a field department without Professor Reed, right? Y'all do understand that, right? Okay, just want to make sure. So now I have the privilege of presenting the Dr. Ida Hastic Award to Miss, don't go too far now, to Miss Zoe Clark. Zoe's mother is here and is accepting the award on her scholar daughter's behalf. Thank you so much, Miss Clark. Shout out to Zoe Clark, y'all. Yay! Would you hand it to her, Doctor? Of course, come on up.
Come between us.
To speak?
I don't know if you would have anything you'd like to say on
Some
her
words
behalf.
for her. Okay. Hi, I'm Zoe's mom. My name is Michelle. Wow. It says Dr. Edna Harris Hastic Academic Achievement Award is hereby presented to Zoe Clark. 2024 Social Work Conference, Medgar Evers College of the City University of New York, Transition Academy, Thursday, March 28, 2024. This is huge. I'm so proud of her. Thank you. I'm gonna put it down and read something really quick. Okay. I'm fine, thank you. Oh gosh, okay. She says, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Medgar Evers, for the undergraduate experience of a lifetime. As a transfer student and now a senior, I can honestly say that no other social campus can match the level of investment, pride, and love that Medgar Evers social work professors pour into us as students. Woo-hoo. Okay. My professors continuously reassure me that I have their support and in and outside of the classroom, and for this I am eternally grateful. Receiving the Dr. Edna Harris Hastic Academy Achievement Award means so much to me because this was not an easy journey. I have failed and lost faith in my academic career more than once. While I was a student on academic probation, I am now a student on the president's list and graduating magna cum laude. Oh gosh, you're gonna make me cry. Next up is grad school. Thank you, Medgar Evers College, for reassuring me that all I need was faith in myself. Lastly, I would like to share my award with the woman reading this to you. On behalf today, my mother, the woman I am today is due to who she has shown me it is possible to be. Even in the face of adversity, my commitment to advocating for others and my passion for community building is a reflection of her resilience. If there are any fellow Jamaicans in the room, this girl is something else, something else. My mother would say jokingly, yes, I would. She says, and I quote, we little but we talawa, right? We might be small, but we are strong. Amen. In other words, social workers and future social workers take up space respectfully. I am overjoyed to receive the Edna Harris Hastic Academy Achievement Award and honored to share it with my first role model in my life, my mother, Michelle Dudney. Me, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
On behalf of Zoe, it is my honor and privilege to present you with this bouquet and all her love and appreciation.